get started. I'm very excited. So we have a lot of wonderful questions, and our purpose for this is to ask practical questions. So just something that our actors and filmmakers can really use on set. So the first one is, of course, how did you become a full-time filmmaker, given that it's such a competitive industry? And also, how long did it take you to get where you are today, and your steps?
Well, I started off, I was always interested in film. And when I was in college, I happened to go to a college that didn't really have a film program. And but I went there with the intention of figuring out where I was going to transfer to. But due to a pretty disastrous first semester, I sort of ended all possibility of transferring anywhere. So I was kind of stuck at the school where I was, although it was a good school. But so I was very involved in photography and art, and so I ultimately became an art major. And but then I discovered that elsewhere in the college there was a television production program, and so I ended up doing a strange hybrid double major that I sort of made up myself. And there was also, through the English department, some like film criticism program. So I don't know how I got all these department heads to agree to it, but I sort of crafted my own little degree. And but when I got out, I started working for a couple of colleges as a media specialist, and I was producing slideshows and audio tapes and some video work for instructors. But that's really not what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the movie business, and ended up working for a production company, but ended up leaving there. But I had learned about this on-the-job training program called the Directors Guild Training Program. And when I first heard about it, I was too late to apply. So I just kind of tucked it back in my head. And a couple of years later, I was at a position that I ended up getting laid off because of where I was working had budgetary problems. But it timed out pretty well that I could apply for this training program. So that's what I ultimately did. So a lot of times in the credits, you'll see DGA trainee. I did that. And so I came from a production background. A lot of people who go through the training program don't have that production background, but I was working on very small crews. But the analogy I've always used is I was sort of a star pitcher on a little league team. I was directing and producing educational programming, but at a very small level. And I wanted to be in the big leagues. So I go into the training program, started working in New York, and I said now it's like the bat boy for the Yankees. And I was at one of the lower rungs of the production ladder, but at least I was working on big productions. So so I got into the DGA training program, and which is usually a 2-year process. And then I was eligible to join the Directors Guild as an assistant director. And then a lot of lucky breaks working as a freelancer. And so to answer the last part of your question, how long did it take? I mean, I've been doing this for 35 years, and from when I guess from when I first got in the training program, that's been 35 years.
I think the question is, how long did it take you to get to, the big budget films, full-time work? I think that's what our aspiring filmmakers are intrigued about.
Well, once I got into unfortunately, when I graduated from the DGA training program, I was right in time for a Writers Guild strike, so there was nothing going on. And I think I worked on one commercial, and then production just sort of dried up and shut down. Unfortunately, I still had some freelance contacts in the industrial corporate video world, so I did that for a little bit. But then my lucky break came when the Writers Guild strike was over, and Dead Poet Society was shooting not too far from where I live, and I couldn't get on that production to save my life. But one day I got a bunch of messages from the location manager, and apparently everybody on the crew was getting lost. And so my foot in the door was I started making maps and directions this is before everybody had a GPS on their phone. We used to have to do paper directions, and I would trace out of map books how to get people where they needed to go. And I mean, it was in Delaware. It's really hard to get lost in Delaware, but they were doing it. And that was really my foot in the door. And then once I got on the production, I basically made myself invaluable and stayed on for the whole thing, and actually bumped up. So my credit, I think my credit on the movie is second AD, but that's not how I had started out. I started off actually lower.
That's
so
awesome.
That was my first big budget production. But then that first AD that I worked with on that took me on his next movie in California, and I worked with him for like 8 years. So on and off.
I think that would be a piece of invaluable advice, is when you are on set, make yourself useful everywhere as
Right.
much as you can, so that you remember.
I worked with a freelancer whose motto was basically, I get fired every day, because you're really hired day by day. And if somebody doesn't like you, they're going to call somebody else in. So his attitude was, I'm getting fired at the end of the day. I better make sure they want to bring me back tomorrow. And that's kind of how your attitude has to be as a freelancer. There's absolutely no security in it. So it's kind of what you make of it.
Yeah. Okay. So next one is, what is the required skill set, and what are the responsibilities of first AD from pre-production to on-set production?
Well, I think my biggest value comes in the pre-production part of things, planning what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, trying to do all the problem solving before a lot of the problems come up. So it's a lot of scouting of the locations and going back to the locations and discussing the logistics. So on a typical large budget feature, I would get 6 to 8 weeks production, but a lot of times I'll come on way before that and put together a schedule, at least a rough schedule based on the shooting script. So I take the script, and I should have brought some audiovisual aids with me, but I break down the script scene by scene and identify all the elements in that scene, and then start putting together a schedule to make it the most efficient use of time in the number of days that are allotted. A lot of times somebody will hand me a script and say, how many days will it take to shoot this? And there's 1,000 answers to that question. And there's a lot of different ways to approach it. And then a lot of times they'll hand me a script and say, we've got 42 days budgeted. Can you figure out how we're going to do this? And then you kind of have to fit the movie into the allotted number of days. So the pre-production's really important. And it's kind of the money that's best spent, and not just as an assistant director, but other department heads coming on and knowing what the director wants and how to facilitate that. Once we get into production, my job is more being the right hand of the director and making sure everyone on the set knows what's going on. The communication down the line is clear, what we're doing, making sure the actors understand what we're doing, making sure everybody knows what we're doing tomorrow. The schedule's constantly changing, so we put out a call sheet every day, but often we've had to change for one reason or another what we're doing tomorrow. So just want to make sure you communicate with everybody what's going on. And then another big part of it is safety. Just make sure the set runs efficiently and safely, and sort of be the foreman on the set. I've always equated it, it's kind of like being the foreman on a building site. The director may be the architect, but I'm the one who's kind of got to put the nuts and bolts together, make sure the crew knows what they're doing. I'm trying to make it so the director's job is easier. So like 100 people on the crew don't come up to the director and ask questions. A lot of them will go through me, or go through the DP, or go through one of the producers. So the director's just not inundated. That way the director can concentrate on directing the actors and communicating what he wants to do with the shots with the director of photography. And I try to make sure everything else is running smoothly.
Now, you mentioned safety, so I'm just going to jump to the big question of the day. It's the coronavirus safety. So we actually just had a question, COVID from an AD perspective, but also I'll just mention a few questions so you can just answer them all together. There was, what are some ways that indie films can balance keeping a budget while maintaining safety? And also, how much will all those COVID precautions increase the budget for the films? and how will that affect scheduling? And I think overall, all these questions are concerned with how much more expensive, lengthy, and difficult will it be now to make films? Will there be less crew, additional compliance officers? Just how will that world, at least for the next year or two, run?
Well, I've been on a lot of discussions between the Producers Guild, the Directors Guild, and a couple other organizations on how to approach this. And it's largely been theoretical. And I was just on a webinar yesterday with a production that's gone through it. It was a smaller production, and they did a lot of green screen, and it was more of a microcosm of how to handle it. And it wasn't a really big crew, and it wasn't a really big cast. So I'm not going to say they had it easy, but they were able to control it very, very efficiently. With a larger scale production, all those problems are going to be magnified. And I know a lot of people keep saying, well, the crews are going to have to be smaller. I'm not everyone's saying that. The unions certainly aren't saying that. No one's going to agree to have a smaller grip crew to take care of. They've got a lot more to do. You got to wipe down C-stands a couple times during the day. All the equipment's got to be sanitized. So I think it's unrealistic to think the crew is going to be any smaller. There's only been a handful of productions that have really been the test cases, but from what I understand, it's not taking twice as long to shoot things, but it's taking considerably longer to shoot. So I'd say 50% longer to 60% longer. So if you had a 50-day shoot, now it's a 75-day shoot. A smaller production is going to get hit even harder because you don't have necessarily any of the infrastructure that's going to support it. So you got to start from scratch. But there's a whole proposal to have a health safety department, and productions are still trying to work that out, and the unions are kind of approving things one by one, and the studios haven't come up with a blanket agreement as of yet, but they're negotiating what the best course of action is.
It's definitely going to be challenging 2 years, but we all can't wait for things to go back. Another question is from screenwriters relating to coronavirus. Should they concentrate on working on the scripts that would be easier to shoot in the coronavirus situation, or should they still let their creativity flow and just hope that, a year or two will pass and we'll be back to what it used to be?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think we really need to be cognizant of what the economic reality is, that it's going to be hard to do scenes with 1,000 extras unless you bring those extras in for days or weeks and quarantine them, which isn't really realistic. Or if you shoot stuff with visual effects and green screen and you do them as separate elements. But I think it's a perfect time for somebody to write My Dinner with Andre too, and really keep things compact. And some of the productions that have started up are the ones that are really contained. Tyler Perry has 2 series shooting in Atlanta now, and everything's happening on their soundstage, and the crew is staying there around the clock. And I think they're calling it Camp Tyler. And at least that's what's proposed. I haven't talked to anybody who's actually on the production, but the ones that are going to start off shooting in the next couple of months are going to really need to be contained. There's a big production happening in New York, a period piece, and they have a fair amount of location work, but they're going to start with everything on stage first, where they can control it. And they hope by the time they've got to go out and do their exteriors, things have pretty much figured themselves out a little bit. But I think it's a whole new reality in terms of how to shoot things with this virus in mind. This production that I attended the seminar yesterday, they had all these pods set up, and so the crew members just kind of hang out in their pod until they're needed. It was very alien looking, but it's a way to keep everybody socially distant.
Yeah. Wow. All right, let's get to more positive parts of our Q&A. So how do you create a collaborative environment for everybody involved in production? And how do you work with a cinematographer during scheduling? And what do you do when there are some tensions between crew members or cast members? Basically, this is a question about relationships on set. How do you manage relationships and interactions on set?
Well, the collaboration part is, first off, it's a collaborative art. And so you have to recognize that, and you have to make sure the people involved recognize that. I worked on a production years ago, and it was just a small little second unit that we had done. But at the end of the day, the director went around and shook the hands of everybody on the crew. And there was a local crew member there that I knew, and he came up to me afterwards. He goes, "Who was that guy?" Who, after the guy just shook his hand. I said, "Well, that's the director." And he goes, "Really?" He goes, "I've never met a director before." And he was a gaffer, an electrician, but no one had taken the time out to thank him for his collaboration. And I've worked with that director on several movies, and he really makes you feel like a collaborator. And that was the first day I really worked with him on set and saw how he feels. He knows he can't make the movie without all the people in the trenches. And not all directors recognize that.
Yeah, that's nice.
And but it really is a collaboration. And I've been on productions where you have a really good crew, but you have one glaringly weak department, and it can drag the whole operation down. And so it's important to recognize those weaknesses and work around that. And the second part of that question was about scheduling with a cinematographer. When I started scheduling when I started as a second AD, I was really implementing someone else's schedule. When you make the step up to working as an AD, you start doing much more of the scheduling, and you kind of work in a vacuum. The first time I did a full feature, a big budget Hollywood feature that I was scheduling myself, I had all the scripts, all the scenes broken down on all these strips, and it was completely consumed my dining room table. I remember just sitting back thinking, well, how do I even start? And I don't know how long it's going to take the cinematographer to shoot something, but I can make some educated guesses. So on a lot of productions, like I said, I might get 8 to 6 weeks prep time. The director of photography usually only gets 2 weeks, or maybe they get a week and then they come back in 2 weeks before we start shooting. They don't get a lot of prep time. And so as soon as they get in, I've got to sit down and say, all right, here's what I've put down here, but it's really up to you. Where do you see problems in the schedule in terms of how long it's going to take to light something? Because when I'm on the set, I've got to rely heavily on the director of photography from shot to shot to know how long it's taking him to set something up. So if he doesn't have any idea how long it's going to take him to set something up, I can't communicate that to the actors or to the prop department or the special effects guys. Everything revolves around this shot to that shot. And I worked with a director of photography who just could not come up with an accurate estimate on the set. And he finally got this little watch that he could turn his bezel of his watch. So if he told me I'll be ready in 20 minutes, then he'd actually set his thing on his watch so he'd know how far off he was when we got to 20 minutes, and then he'd say, oh, I need another 20 minutes. And but they're kind of the lifeblood of the set. And I didn't realize how important that was until I found myself interviewing for jobs, and that's often my first question before I've met the director or anything. When I first get an inquiry from a production manager or producer, I'll ask them, who's the DP? Because if it's somebody who's slow as molasses, you're never going to achieve the schedule that everyone thinks that you have to fit it into. I worked on one movie where the cinematographer thought his game plan was use really fast film and Steadicam, and he didn't light anything. So I remember the first shot of the movie on day one, he's like, okay, well, I'm ready. And I was like, I got 300 extras to set. So hold on. I remember leaving, had a camera perched up 2 stories up or 3 stories up. I marched down, it was a prison movie. I marched down to the yard in the prison, and I just grabbed my second ADs and said, camera's ready, so just like throw something together and we'll figure it out. And we quickly set up the extras and brought in the actors. But I learned on the first shot that this director of photography needs no time at all. And it was kind of baptism under fire, but we figured it out pretty quickly.
Nice.
And then you had a third part of the question about tensions on the set, which happens surprisingly often. Not so much between actors and other people, but you get a lot of tension behind the scenes with crew members or different departments that don't get along.
You mean among the departments or within the department?
From one department to another department. And although I have seen some behavior from actors that is not appalling, but just pretty interesting. I had one actor, we were shooting a scene the scene took place in a rowboat, with two actors in a rowboat. And to shoot the scene, we had a camera on a barge, and we were connected to the little rowboat with the barge. There was like 8 of us on the barge. And basically, there's a big argument between the director and the actor, famous actor, who I won't name. And basically, he unscrewed the boat from the barge and rowed off with the lead actress. And the director's like, don't look at him, just let him go. And I'm like looking at the sun, thinking the sun's sinking fast, and we're out here in a barge, and the lead actor just quit. And the hair and makeup people are coming over in a little pontoon, and we're like waving them off to like, no, we don't need you now. And but it all worked out. But it's been some interesting episodes.
Well, it wasn't funny at the moment.
No, but in that case, I couldn't really intervene.
Yeah.
There was a creative difference between the actor and the director that actually stemmed from a problem with the studio that we were shooting it for, and the director is kind of speaking for the studio, and it was just a nasty creative clash. So I couldn't step in and say, come on guys, work this out, because it wasn't something that was going to be easily resolved. And it ultimately worked itself out, and but it was an interesting episode.
Yeah. But is it usually the job of the first AD to resolve tensions, or is it
not necessarily to resolve them, but I can diffuse them.
Okay.
And if something's not working, I can suggest that we go on to something else, or we can take a break, or we break for lunch early. But you can recognize those troubles brewing as they go. And again, it comes down to pre-production. Had part of that dilemma between that actor and the director really should have been figured out during the rehearsal period. Mm-hmm. And which wouldn't necessarily have been my responsibility, but if I saw that problem was bubbling up, we could have attacked it more efficiently by doing it not when we're out in a lake with the sun dropping. Ironically, when that movie came out, that scene is what they put as the first thing in the trailer. Mm-hmm. So and when I heard it, I was just like, I can't believe after all we went through, that's how they're marketing the movie.
That's funny. All right, so there is another question came up that is based on what we're talking about now, that a lot of the things that you've mentioned as your duties are actually part of the role of line producer. So do you work in tandem with them, or do you find yourself at cross purposes?
Well, both to some degree. But I usually work pretty closely with the line producer, and I've worked as a production manager, which is essentially the same role. And they have to be the bad guy. They have to be the person that says no often, and even in defiance of the director. But usually, again, it's a collaboration. You're trying to work it out. You're trying to come up with the best solution for whatever problem's at hand. And also, my thing's always been, you're trying to make the best movie you can. I'm doing this because I really like movies. I like going to movies. I like watching movies, and I like talking about movies. And I like making movies, and but I prefer making good movies. So anything we do is to try to, in service of the story, and trying to realize the director's vision, often. But it all comes down to communication, both, with those tensions we talked about, but also working with a line producer. You have to both know where each other are coming from and what problems exist. And again, it's stuff you need to work out in prep. You can't figure out on day 26, all of a sudden the line producer says, well, we can't afford a crane tomorrow, when the whole time we've been scouting and talking about it, we've got this big grand crane shot. Well, don't tell us that day or the day before that all of a sudden we don't have the crane. That could have been discussed weeks ago, and we could have come up with an alternate solution. And so it's always kind of a give and take. I had one line producer who, at the end of the day, would always kind of pull me aside, and she felt like we had to have our 10 minutes or 15 minutes of decompression of what was going on. It took me a little while to understand what she was doing, and she was new to the whole thing, but it ended up being a great little chance for the two of us to evaluate where we were. In that instance, it was a movie that pretty much shot in one location on one set, and we had X number of days to do it, and we were falling behind, and I kept trying to reassure her, yeah, we're behind, but we're not that far behind. We're going to catch up. And we kind of caught up, but it was hard for her to see where we were in the big picture. So I had to keep reassuring her that, yeah, we're not quite there, but we're picking up steam.
Yeah.
So
now, organization of TV commercial versus organization of feature or TV show, how does that differ on your end?
Well, one big way is I often don't have nearly the amount of prep time that I feel like I should on a commercial. A lot of times they'll bring me in, let's say it's a commercial that shoots for 2 or 3 days. They'll bring me in for one day to scout the location and then cut me loose for a couple of days while they continue prepping. And usually I'm just at home, essentially working for free, because I've got my own process of how I want to do things. So I need to do some of that prep on my own. I can't just walk back in on the shoot day and say, okay, we're going to wing it. But a commercial, I mean, commercials are so different from commercial to commercial, so it varies a lot. But a lot of times you have full storyboards on commercials, where on a lot of features in TV you don't. Although Night Shyamalan is unique as a director. He storyboards every shot in the movie ahead of time, so that's an asset. But commercials are like that. So then I'll actually, usually I'm scheduling a movie day by day and scene by scene. With commercials and with night storyboards, I'm often scheduling the movie shot by shot. And so a lot of times for a commercial, we'll take the storyboards and we'll put them in the order that we're going to shoot, and it's a lot easier for everybody to see how we're going to tackle it. But the nice thing about commercials is they're much more manageable. You're not worried about 6 weeks down the road of what we're going to shoot in another state or another country. It's all sort of contained. Mm-hmm. And so it's a little microcosm of what a larger production would be, but it's essentially the same concept. The other big difference in a commercial is you have an agency and a client contingency there who sort of approve everything shot by shot, and you don't have that sort of process on a film. So a lot of times it's you get the scene and then you kind of drop anchor while you wait for the folks in Video Village to decide if we've achieved what we're supposed to achieve. And and that varies from production to production as well. I produce a lot of commercials, so I've also been the person in Video Village trying to encourage them to move on to the next thing, that the director feels like we've accomplished the shot, let's move on to something else.
Okay. What is more stressful, producing or assistant directing?
It really depends on the scope of the production. I'd say working as an assistant director is more stressful for me with most of the things I've done, because the stuff I've produced hasn't been as high pressure things. Whereas I've done a lot of stunts and action work as an assistant director, and that's a lot more challenging, and I don't necessarily say stressful, but more stress inducing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now,
But as a producer, on the things that I've produced, if it all goes wrong, the buck stops at your desk. So you sort of have to be the person who's going to take the ultimate responsibility for things not working well.
yeah. I mean, both are challenging indeed. Now, talking about challenges, what was your biggest challenge that you have encountered, unexpected challenge, and how did you find the drive to keep going when you faced certain setbacks? Maybe in this case, the pandemic, or in other cases, some other situations.
A lot of times,
questions.
a lot of times, part of what we've got to do in terms of shooting something efficiently is having a plan B, kind of in your hip pocket, and then plan C, D, and E in case something goes wrong. So we're constantly working around weather problems. Mm-hmm. Sometimes your schedule upends completely. I worked on one production where every day we put out 2 call sheets, and if cloudy, we're doing this. If sunny, we're doing that, and which means we're doubling up on all our prep, because you need this group of elements for sunny and this group of elements for cloudy. Or one show, if it's cloudy, we're headed to Charleston. So it's like have all these contingency plans. You're juggling all these different balls in the air, and who knows which problem you have to confront. So I don't know which one was my most challenging, but in a lot of respects, it's the productions that are, at least for me, the ones that are ill-funded, have large ambition but have really limited resources. And I'm
going to ask you, how do you deal with the budgeting when you have so many plans in line, because that all requires so much?
Right. And those are the roadblocks you run into. If you say, on a smaller budget, you can't have plan C, D, and E. Yeah. You can only have plan A and plan B, and then you just like start over if either of those work. So there's a lot of different variables, and it's different on every production. I've had productions where the lead actors get sick. I had a lead actor who was out for 2.5 weeks, and we had to juggle the crew the whole time. We were toward the end of the production. We didn't have a whole lot to shoot, so it wasn't like there was other things we could do while we're waiting for the actor to recover. I've had actors ill the morning of production, and then all of a sudden we're going to something else. I did one production where we weren't sure what we were going to do. We knew we were going to let the crew go, but I didn't want to have to call every person on the crew at the end of the day. So I talked to the production manager. We were next to an arcade, and said, "Can we just send these guys over here with a roll of quarters and let them play here until we figure out what we're going on, what we're doing, break them for lunch, and then after lunch we can tell them where we're shooting tomorrow." So fortunately, that production was big enough that we had the resources that we could juggle things like that. We didn't have to shoot something that day. A lot of these large productions have insurance, so if you can't shoot and you've run out of all your contingency plans, then they can put in an insurance claim and see if they can make up some of the overage through their insurance coverage. But that's kind of a last resort, and some of these larger studios are self-insured, so they're not really even, it's still their money that they've got to reimburse themselves, which doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm. Now that leads us to the budgeting question, which is one of the biggest questions, especially for indie filmmakers. how do you ensure the budget? What are some steps besides crowdfunding that local filmmakers, not local, aspiring filmmakers and indie filmmakers can take?
Find a rich uncle. That always works. No, it's if I knew the perfect answer to that, I would have moved on years ago and directed my epic. But it comes in all different kinds of shapes and sizes. So it's crowdfunding is relatively new. You used to just basically have to find a benefactor. I tried to get a film off the ground a few years ago, and we had sort of the contingency, or the concept was, if we had a major agency willing to put up half the money, if we could raise the other half locally. So we formed a little corporation and we sold shares, and we got all these people who got excited about the idea of making a movie to chip in, and it all went very swimmingly. But then the agency, who was always kind of the sure thing, ended up backing out, and not for any good reason. It just, I don't know if the main producer sort of misunderstood what the deal was, but it all fell apart. But it was really just a whole bunch of people who were willing to pony up X number of dollars to be a shareholder in this production. The problem is, you can't guarantee anybody a return on their investment. So it's really hard. I worked on a production recently where the money was raised by basically a bunch of friends, and some of them had been successful in real estate, and they'd gone to college with the writer of the production, and they all put in X number of dollars, and then one guy spoke to another friend who ponied up another chunk of money. So they raised enough money to put the thing together, and it was not an expensive movie, and but it's done relatively well. But have they made a big return on their investment? I doubt it. Did they break even? Probably. But, and will they do it again? Maybe. But I worked with a company one time, and they had this really impressive slate of movies. Every year they'd send a movie to Sundance, and they got people to invest in their movies, but none of their movies ever made money. And there's only so many times you can go back to an investor and say, okay, give me another $100,000, and because you're basically just flushing the money down the drain, because you're making these movies. They could be good movies, but they're not returning anything to those investors. And,
so that takes us to the question, whether is it possible to make a living as an indie filmmaker? I guess that.
Well, it's certainly possible. Okay. What goes back to making good movies. You know, if you've got a great script, you're going to find people to back that production. Mm-hmm. And that's not my area of expertise, raising money. I'm much better at spending money. And although I try to spend it efficiently, but yeah, if I knew how to raise money, I'd be going a definitely different direction than I'm going now. But it's near impossible, and I've dabbled in it, but it's I'm not a salesman, so I'm not very good at that.
Gotcha. Okay. So, 1 second.
But if you don't have a great script, you know, you'd be lucky to get somebody to invest in it. Mm-hmm. And I've read enough scripts that I think I usually know when it's a good script. A lot of investors don't recognize that, and there's a lot of really bad scripts out there that seem to get money. So it's a conundrum that I can't quite solve.
Yeah. But what do you see as a good script?
Well, something that's got compelling characters, and something that's I love anything that's kind of a fresh take on storytelling. So, for example, a movie like Memento, which has an involuted storyline where it's actually told in reverse. And I mean, other movies have done that. There's a great movie from the 60s or 70s called The Two of Us. that's told in reverse, or the movie Betrayal told in reverse. But just a fresh look at storytelling is something that always attracts me. Something that, but you've got to have compelling characters, and it's got to be something that just grabs you. And it's been a couple of times where I've read a script where I just cannot put it down, and I call it fwapping. The sound when you turn the page, reading a script. Sometimes you just whip the page to the next one, and it just makes this sound. You're like ripping the paper right out of the binder. When it's a really compelling story. I remember when I first read the script to Dead Poet Society, I was on a train going to New York, and I'd read most of the script, and I got to New York and I had like 20 pages left. And I remember getting off at Penn Station and just sitting on a really nasty sidewalk in New York, reading the script because it was so good. And ironically, in that third act of Dead Poets, that sequence that I was just so intrigued by, it's actually not even in the movie. Dead Poets is such a rich script. I read like a novel. There's so many different parts to it because it's a kind of an ensemble piece. But there's so much that we shot that's not in the finished movie that's still really good stuff.
Wow.
So that doesn't happen a lot, but it's happened a few times with me.
Mm-hmm.
I also, one of the best scripts I ever read was 12 Monkeys, because you're taken down this path, and all of a sudden you're like halfway through the movie or 2/3 of the way through the movie, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, this isn't the movie I thought it was. And all of a sudden it makes a big zag in a different direction, and you know, it's not that it was a big twist. It's just it leads you down one path, and then all of a sudden you realize that the path you thought the movie was taking is not at all where it's going. So. Yeah. So anytime you have like kind of an intriguing take on a story, I think that's a really attractive story.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how do you, what would you advise to the aspiring filmmakers to go to film school traditional way, or to become a PA and just grow up the ladder and learn on set? And how did you pursue it? I think you said that you created your own major, but what do you think now that you've been through your path? What do you think is the right way to go in today's industry?
Well, it depends where you ultimately want to go. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I find that a lot of people I meet who come out of film school want to start at the top. And you don't usually start at the top. You usually start at the bottom. And one thing that's unfortunate these days, I've run into a lot, is kids are coming out of college with so much student debt they can't afford to be a PA. And I had long communication with a young man a couple of years ago who I could just tell talking to him on the phone. He was really bright. He wanted to be a director, and I could tell this kid's going to be a director. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he wants. But he was saddled with so much college debt. He went and sold insurance, and I think he's still selling insurance. And so I think that's really unfortunate. But I think if you want to be a director, you got to be a storyteller. And you don't have to be a great writer, but you really have to understand how great writing works. And so I don't think you necessarily have to go to film school. I mean, it doesn't hurt, but I hire a lot of people, and I don't hire very many people who've come out of film school. They may have come out of a college that has a production program, but when I hire people, I'm looking more for enthusiasm and stamina. And stamina sounds like a stupid quality, but when you're standing on a set for 14 hours, sometimes in the rain and the snow, and telling people in Times Square that they have to go around the block, you know, you need a lot of stamina and you need a lot of enthusiasm. And so when I interview people, it's more about who they are than what they've done. So unless you've gone to the Ivy League, I'm usually not that impressed with what the college credentials are, and even then, that doesn't always work in your favor. So it really depends where you want to go. And again, if you want to direct, I think you really have to write and direct, starting with smaller things, then moving into bigger things. If you want to be a cinematographer, if you want to be another craftsman on the set, just get your foot in the door. There's so many people in the Philadelphia market, so many crew members in the Philadelphia market who at one point were one of my PAs. And then they decide to go into the prop department or go into the electrical department or go into the camera department. And but being a production assistant is a good way to see how all the different departments run. And as an assistant director, you become kind of a generalist rather than a specialist. So you get to see how, I know what everybody's job is. I can't do everybody's job, but I understand how all those parts work. And if you come on a film as a production assistant, you get to experience that. Mm-hmm. I worked with one woman who was a set decorator, and I learned that she had come through the Directors Guild, and I was surprised that she ended up as a set decorator, even though she had started off as an AD. And she said, well, I just didn't like dealing with actors that much. And so I started looking around to see what everybody else on the set did. And she ran into this one person, and she said, oh, she had a whole bunch of shopping bags. She goes, well, what do you do? And she goes, oh, I'm a shopper. And this woman was like, I want to be a shopper. And so she went to the set decorating department and started going out and being their shopper. She'd spend all day buying tchotchkes and pillows and furniture and stuff, and she loved it. She'd come back every day with more bags than she could carry, and just kind of worked her way up and became a set decorator. But she started off because she was a generalist and she could kind of evaluate what everybody else on the set was doing.
Mm-hmm. And how do you usually find your crew? And I think I'll just combine it with another question of how can indie filmmakers also find their crew that is on a limited budget? So I think both questions. How do you find for big budget films, and how can indie filmmakers do that?
Well, it's all about networking. So if you're an indie filmmaker and you're trying to get a film off the ground, you got to talk to some people who have done it before, so you kind of understand what the process is. So the first thing I usually recommend somebody do for potential writer director is find a production designer or an aspiring production designer, because you're not going to get a real experienced production designer to work on somebody's first small little independent film, but you might find somebody in the art department who wants to bump up. Sit down and talk to them about what the look of what your production should look like, and similarly find a DP. And it doesn't have to be a major league DP, but someone who's shot things. Maybe they've shot commercials. Maybe they've been a camera operator or an assistant cameraman on things, on larger things, and they want to make the move up. So you got to sit down and talk to them about what the look of the piece is you're trying to achieve, and also how you want to tell the story. And again, the whole thing of raising money is a whole different issue. But in terms of finding other creative personnel, it's just calling people or writing people and finding out, would you read my script? I'd be interested in talking to you how to make this movie come to life. And so I think it really starts with a production designer and a cinematographer.
And what about the big budget productions where it's just all about finding the right crew? It's not about finding crew for the right budget. It's more of finding highly qualified crew. How does that usually go? And also, how can local crew apply to your sets and maybe also be one of those successful ones who you later see growing up the ladder?
Well, in Pennsylvania, we're pretty lucky because there are two really strong film offices in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, and there's other regional ones as well. And they're great clearinghouses for knowing what's going on, from student films to big budget films. And so usually you can find out who's starting to hire and just see if you can get your foot in the door. I mean, the problem in entry level crew members is supply and demand are way out of whack. There's so many more people who want to get in the business, then there's room for it. And as an assistant director, my staff is hiring the production assistants, and that's usually viewed as entry-level positions. But I've worked on productions where every one of my production assistants were all very experienced, and most of them had worked with me on something else. And so it's not really entry-level at all from that standpoint. So usually what I'll do if I start on, I know that I've got a production coming up. I've got an idea who I might want to hire as the second ADs, and I'll tell them, start looking for production assistants, and they'll see who's available, and so, you know, they've met people that I haven't met, and we start putting a whole team together. Likewise, in other departments, it's the same sort of thing. The key grip is going to hire other guys under him, other grips under him who he's worked with before, or who's gotten a recommendation from somebody else. So it's all networking.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And if you're coming into it out of the blue, you know, just to have a good resume. And again, if there's not a lot of experience on it, just make sure you exude enthusiasm and stamina. I used to joke when I'd start on a movie, you know, the production office has usually already been open for weeks, and my first day they'd come with a whole pile of resumes. You know, I get a stack of resumes, you know, 1.5 feet high. It feels like nowadays when I start a movie, that stack of resumes is, you know, maybe 20 high, and you know, most of those people have never worked on a movie before. So I mean, I've hired people with absolutely no experience, but there's one guy that I hired on a league of their own. I got this resume, and it had a cover sheet, and this is, you know, so this is 20-some years ago. It had a cover sheet that said, top 10 reasons why you should hire Jim Weiss, you know, like on a David Letterman thing. And it was hilarious. And one of them was, so my grandmother can tell her bridge club that her son works in the movie business. And it was that kind of thing. I brought that kid in for an interview.
Awesome.
And we put him on as an intern. By the end of the movie, and he lived in the Chicago area. By the end of the movie, we had flown him for the bulk of the work in Indiana, and kept him on for the entire shoot. He did the first assistant director's next movie after that. He's now a producer for HBO.
Nice.
And but if he didn't have that unique resume, he would have gone back to grad school, and who knows what he would have done. But instead, it caught somebody's eye, and we brought him in, and we saw what an asset he was for all of us on the set, and it was great.
That's inspiring. That's nice. And now a question from the actors.
Yep.
What do you appreciate from the actors on set? Like what kind, what do you expect and appreciate most from the actors that you are working with?
Just professionalism and the ability to kind of roll with the punches, because it's always going to be unpredictable. But you know, I'd say it's very rare where I've ever worked with an actor who's coming in who doesn't know their lines. So you really have to have done your homework ahead of time, know your lines, understand the scene, have some good questions. You know, the director wants to direct. The director wants to have somebody who's directable. They want a piece of clay that they can mold, not just a lump of mud that doesn't change. So you've got to be able to understand that the director might have a different take on the scene than you do. So you just have to be flexible. And again, much of that comes down to if you're an actor who's on the run of a show, you get the advantage of having either some rehearsal time before you start shooting, or at least you're developing your character as it goes. If you're a day player coming in because you've got 3 lines, you still have to come in with that same level of professionalism, but you still have to be able to be flexible and know that your way isn't the only way, and kind of be at the mercy of the director.
Mhm.
The director loves having somebody comes in who's completely polished, who knows what they want. They've got a take on it. They might say, you know, do you want me to deliver this line angry, or do you want me to be anticipatory, or, you know, so just do your homework ahead of time. And I'm always amazed because I don't know how actors memorize all their lines and understand all the nuances of the characters. But I'm always impressed with how good actors are once they're there on the set.
Mhm. Okay. Now, what were some of your favorite film sets to work on, and who were some of your favorite and least favorite stars to work with?
Um, I've worked on a handful of movies that everybody knew kind of right from the beginning were not that they're going to be classics, but that they were going to be a great experience to work on, and that um, we were really doing something special. Like we had that buzz on Dead Poets. Everybody kind of knew from reading the script that this is going to be something really good, and then the team that was assembled to be on it was just outstanding. And it was a movie that really didn't have a lot of resources. We didn't really have a long shooting schedule. We were very limited on how many days we had Robin Williams, and so he was doing a show on Broadway at the time, so we only had him on Mondays for the first couple of weeks of the shoot, and then by the end of the shoot, we didn't have him at all. So we had to work around that, and that was tough for him. He'd hop in the car on Sunday night after a performance and drive down to where we were shooting, and it was tough on him. But we knew it was a great script and knew it was going to be a great project. So that's one that is very memorable. We all knew that The Sixth Sense was going to be something outstanding. Again, it starts with the script, and then you start seeing some of the players involved, and it really snowballed into just a unique experience. And but then there's a couple others that were just great to work on that weren't necessarily classic movies. Like every time I would run into somebody that I had worked with on the Pelican Brief, everybody said, "Man, that was the best movie to work on ever." And it's a good movie. I just actually watched it again about 2 weeks ago. But is it a classic? Is it gonna be known as a great movie forever and ever? I don't think so. But man, we had a lot of fun shooting it, and we had a lot of fun shooting in League of Their Own. Except it was also one of the hardest things I ever did. I mean, it sounded like a great idea on paper. Let's go to the Midwest for the summer and play baseball with girls. It sounded like, hey, what could be wrong with that? But it was a tough shoot, but it was a lot of fun. And we shot most of it in Evansville, Indiana. We sort of took over Evansville. It was kind of fun.
Awesome. Now, the favorite and least favorite stars.
Stars or actors? Because to me, that's
Actors.
two different things. I said for a lot of years that I thought Denzel Washington was clearly the best actor I've ever seen, that I've ever worked with. And that was before that's before I worked with Meryl Streep. And so I worked with Meryl Streep on Doubt, which was a really great experience for me because the director had only directed one movie before. He really had a theater background, and he had written the play, which had won a Tony and had great acclaim and won Tonys for many of the actors who were in the original production. So when we got together to start rehearsing Doubt, he invited me in to be on the rehearsals. And a lot of times I'm not, as the first AD, a lot of times I'm not in on the rehearsals. Usually it's just the director and the actors, but the director wanted me and the director of photography in. And so the first day I'm looking around the room and I'm looking at, it's Philip Seymour Hoffman and Amy Adams, and the cinematographer was an award winner. And so I'm looking around the room saying, okay, Oscar nominee, Oscar winner, Oscar nominee, multiple Oscar winner, and then me. And it was just amazing to think, the talent that was in the room. And then the only other actor there who hadn't yet been nominated was Viola Davis, who was nominated for her part in the movie. I think all four leads were nominated for their roles in Doubt. And so it's that was just a stellar cast with Amy Adams and Viola and Philip Seymour Hoffman and Meryl, and they were just brilliant. And then I was just really blown away by James McAvoy in Split, and he's a great guy too. And so it's I've been lucky. I've had a lot of good experiences with actors.
That's amazing. Now, sorry, I didn't cross out all those questions, and there's so many of those. So, okay. So, how can an experienced filmmaker in the indie world get to the big budget film world, but without having to go all the way down to working as a PA? So, let's say he was already somewhere mid-level to top, but now he wants to switch that whole field. So
again, it comes down to making good movies. So as an indie filmmaker, if that filmmaker has made good quality movies, get it seen by people. Either get it into a festival or get it into the hands of an agent or a producer, and somebody who can help champion that person to somebody who can put them on the map, be it a studio or a financier or whatever. I'm kind of amazed at there are a lot of young filmmakers who do one film, and then all of a sudden the studio comes in and says, we want you to do the next Star Wars movie. So you're going from Ryan Coogler, is that director from Creed? He made Fruitvale Station, small independent film. All of a sudden, it's like, okay, you're doing the next Rocky movie.
Yeah, that was an impressive.
That's a big leap there, but he proved he could do that. And so you just, again, it goes back to making a good movie. And there's a lot of independent filmmakers out there who make a lot of bad movies, and they're not going anywhere. And I worked with a guy years ago who I had worked with he was a producer and production manager, but he had an opportunity to direct. And he did this horrible little horror film, and he's a great guy. But the film didn't do well, and it was grossly underfunded. So it not only did it not do well, but it was just not a very, very good movie. Didn't do well commercially, and unfortunately, that's the end of his directing career. So it's really easy to make the wrong move, and I see it a lot of times when, and I was warned about this, when you try to make the move from a second AD to a first AD. First off, the first AD is often the scapegoat. When things are going wrong, you're not going to fire the director, and you're not going to fire the producers, and you're usually not going to fire the DP. But man, the AD is certainly expendable. So, and it sends a message to everybody else. But I was warned, don't move into a production that's impossible. And in the case of that director, he moved into a situation that was impossible. It wasn't a great script. It didn't have the money to do it. It wasn't really backed by a marketing team that was going to do the right thing with it. So it ended up being a really lackluster directorial debut, and it sort of negated his potential of getting other work as a director. He kept working as a producer, but to my knowledge, he never directed another movie. Wow. So you got to be really careful where those career steps take you. It's really easy to make a bad move.
Mm. So what about, you brought up film festivals. Do you believe that film festivals are very important to the success of the film, or
and I think more and more that becomes more and more important. I went to the American film market last year because a film that I worked on was being marketed there. And you see all these other movies that are being shopped, and like I can't believe some of these movies even get made. You know, just from the poster, you're like, yeah, I don't who wants to see this movie, but somebody made the movie and somebody put the money up for it, and some actor decided to be in it, and but the you know, there's a lot of bad stuff made. So, but the film festival is a way to get stuff seen, and at least it's juried and it's curated. So presumably you're seeing more of the cream of the crop. And however, two of the best films that I've seen in the last 20 years, I saw at film festivals, and both of them won awards. One was at the Austin Film Festival, and one was at Sundance. Both of them won awards, but nobody ever saw them. One got kind of a disappointing limited release in the Midwest in a chain of theaters I'd never heard of before, and then it came out on video with a different title and marketed completely different. The other movie was, and that first movie had won, maybe not like the grand prize at the Austin Film Festival, but it won several different awards. And the other film I saw at Sundance, and it got a lot of notoriety, it never even got a real release. So sometimes it's right place at the right time. The other thing that happens is somebody, if you're lucky enough to sell a film at a film festival, a lot of times whoever the distributor is might sit on it for 2 years because it doesn't fit into what their other movies are that are being released. So I've seen some really good films that just kind of then stay on the vine too long. By the time they're finally released, people have fallen out of love with it, or it's just not marketed properly, and it just kind of dies a slow, quiet death. But so it's tough. But I think film festivals are really important, and there's a lot of really good short film festivals too, and or at least shorts. Some festivals are nothing but shorts, but also a lot of other festivals include a lot of shorts. So I think that's a key for aspiring filmmakers. You know, you make a killer short, and I've seen some really good shorts, and they're a great launching pad for a film career, and certainly a little more manageable than trying to do your first feature on a shoestring budget.
Yeah.
And I saw a short a couple of years ago, and it wasn't the best movie I've ever seen, but it was one of the most smartly made films I'd ever seen. You know, almost the whole thing took place in like a school administrator's office, but there were all kinds of things going on the outside. You could hear police sirens, and you could hear the students. It was like an active shooter situation, but it's all taking place in the school office. So it's done kind of on a mini budget, but that had all this other implication around it, and it was just really smartly made. And you know, I could have shot it here in my basement, and if I was good at art direction, and but you know, you tell the story in the right way. You make everybody think there's hundreds of people on the outside that are all revolving around your story on the inside. Similarly, there's a movie that was nominated last year. I'm blanking on the name, but it was two people in a car, and then one person at a 911 dispatch area. So those are the only two locations, and one of the best scripts I've ever experienced. And it's just really, really well made, and then really, really well acted. And so you can make a short film for very little money and show people that you can, you know, take the reins of a larger production. So I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, it did. And would you say that film festivals is the only way to bring smaller short films or indie films to the big screen, or are there other ways to do that?
No, if you make a good short, again, comes back to making a good movie. If you make a really good short, um, shop it around to different agents, and whether it's a literary agent or an agent who represents directors, you can get your work seen. And if you impress one person, maybe they can't help you, but they'll pass you down the line to somebody else who might be able to help you out. But for an independent filmmaker, again, it comes down to telling a good story and making a well-made story, and just be passionate about it. For anybody working in this business, if you don't have the passion, you're not going to succeed, because it's a hard business. It's a thankless business. It's full of rejection. And so if you're not passionate about it, goes back to my enthusiasm and stamina. That enthusiasm, both enthusiasm and stamina, are kind of fueled by passion. If you don't have the passion, it's you're not. It's going to be hard to succeed.
Yeah. Now, with success, how do you combine a successful full-time career in film with family?
That's hard, and I've got to say that I'm really glad that I got married before I got in the film business, because I don't know how I would have started a relationship in the film business. I've got a really understanding wife who was in a very similar business, so she understood kind of where what was involved in some crazy career choices, and just was really supportive. And then luckily I had two very understanding kids who understood that dad's got to go away for 6 months, and then maybe he'll come back, or maybe he'll go someplace else for 6 months. So, but because you end up traveling, I mean, at least I ended up traveling a lot. A lot of people like to stay in one geographic area. For me, being close to the Philadelphia market, it wasn't quite big enough for me to grow as I was coming up in the business, and there wasn't that much going on in Philadelphia when I started in the business. So I spent a lot of time shooting something on the West Coast, and then shooting somewhere up and down the Eastern Seaboard, and occasionally that would mean Philadelphia. But fortunately, I had a really supportive family, and I don't know how I would have done it otherwise. It's hard to cultivate relationships in this business, and I've watched so many people, so many of my peers. I've seen relationships deteriorate because of the business, and I also know dozens of people who met on sets and have been married for decades from people they've met in the business. I just can't imagine I would have had any success that way. And then the other thing I find, it's I don't envy women, because it's really hard to get yourself established in a freelance world, and then take a couple years off to have children, or take some time off to have a child, and then reinsert yourself in the business, and then do it again. I've worked with so many women who kind of got to 50 years old, and they're like, oh, I think I forgot to have children. And and it's no going back at that point. But so it's doubly hard, I think, for women. And but I've known some really good people who left the business for family reasons, and I don't begrudge them that, but it's not easy. I mean, the idea of being a freelancer is a near impossible hurdle to leap over. It's a really tough business, and nobody teaches you that in film school, how to be a freelancer. But that's really a key part of it. I've worked with some really good people who got out of the business because they just couldn't figure out how to make a living when you don't know where your next paycheck is coming from, or what you're going to be doing a month from now. And I love that. I told you a little bit about my college past. I basically majored in goofing off, and so I'm really good between projects at finding stuff to do that's not related to the movie business. And so I love the unpredictability of the schedule, but it it's not easy. I mean, for years, trying to plan a family vacation with your siblings or with other extended family or friends, it's like, oh, let's go to the beach next summer. It's like, well, I don't know where I'm going to be next summer, and I can't commit to anything now. So you just have to work around that, be spontaneous, and sometimes you can say, okay, I'm taking the summer off, but you usually can't do that. So it's tough, but you really need to have a really good support system.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like I was really worried. I was traveling so much when my kids were little, and years later, when my daughter was in her 20s, and she said, "Dad, I don't feel like you were ever gone." And I was like, I thought there's all the scar tissue from Dad being gone for so long, but they would come and visit me all the time. But in between projects, I got to be the 24-hour dad. I coached soccer, and I went on field trips, and I was at almost all of their performances. Although I did miss an entire season of soccer of my son because of some project, but you just have to learn how to juggle it.
Okay. Now, another big question that came up several times is age in the industry. Are you able to start later and still make it somewhere? So I mean, most of it was around that. Like, can you in your 40s or 50s just suddenly become a PA and then grow up the ladder, or can you start shooting a film at that age? And
You
same for
can,
actors.
you can, but it's really, really hard. But again, it goes back to you got to be passionate about it, and you got to be tenacious. There's a lot of rejection, and it's even harder if you're coming at it from that sort of standpoint. There is an ageism problem. I mean, my phone's not ringing like it used to. I've always said, early on I worked with an older AD, and I could see his career kind of waning, and I was like, wow, why isn't that guy working as much as he used to? And I realized it's a young man's game, and it's also part of the enthusiasm and stamina. A lot of people don't think we old guys have enthusiasm and stamina, but we do. But you're definitely working at a disadvantage. And they say it's really hard for older writers to break in. And but the way around that is to write something that's really good, and no one will care how old the writer is if it's really good. And when I say good, again, it goes back to being unique and compelling and something different. It's I don't want to say it's easy to write a great or a good romantic comedy or kind of a run-of-the-mill mystery, but to do something that's really different takes somebody special.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, ageism is a problem, but it's not insurmountable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, another question from the actors is, what are the do's and don'ts for the actors? And what are some ways to make them stand out, either at auditions or on set, so that they're remembered?
I
think that goes again, we're not talking about stars, we're talking about actors who are trying to make it, getting right. Day players, one-liners, guest stars.
Again, it's a matter of doing your homework and being prepared and having a point of view. So even if you're coming in for an audition, come in with a different point of view, or at least consider different points of view on how your character might be acting in this particular scene. And that way, if you come in, say you come in with your guns a-blazing in an audition and you're over the top, the director still may be interested in giving you a little bit of direction to see if you can tone it down. I've seen so many auditions. What's more important than the look or the performance is your ability to show your directability, if that makes any sense. The director wants to know they've got somebody they can direct, and they can take direction. And so even though your point of view on it might be diametrically opposed to what the director wants to do, at least you come in with something that's maybe a little bit out of the ordinary. But then if the director says, okay, well now try doing it a little bit quieter. And if you can kind of take that note and interpret it and come up with something that catches the director's eye, you're way ahead of the game than if you just came in sort of wimpy, for lack of a better word, and kind of a more typical take. Again, that's not my area of expertise necessarily, auditions, but I've been to quite a few. But I feel like the directability issue is key.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now back to the AD world. What are the top three secrets to being a great AD?
Surprisingly, it took me a couple of years for somebody to tell me this, and it was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But be honest. You don't think somebody should have to tell you to be honest. But when you're the guy back in base camp and people are saying, what's taking her so long in hair and makeup? You start making up answers. How soon until she's walking a set? 5 minutes. All right. I just made that up. I've got no basis in fact of why it's going to be 5 minutes, but I got to come up with something. But you just got to be honest, even if it's, I don't know. And so you've got to be honest with your director, and you've got to be honest with your producer. If it's all falling apart, don't try to sugarcoat it by saying, "Oh yeah, it'll all work out. Just wait. This will pass." No, you've got to be honest, saying, "Hey, it's all falling apart," or I'm not sure this actor is really going to make it for the 6 weeks of the shoot because they're just crazy neurotic and they're driving everybody else crazy neurotic. And actually, we didn't get to the worst actors, but we'll skip that. So you've got to be honest. The other thing is you got to have that plan B and plan C. You've got to me, being on the set's like a chess game. You got to think several moves ahead. I worked with this one key grip one time, and he would apologize every time he'd come up to me, but he'd have the call sheet and he'd have the shooting schedule. And he goes, I hate to bother you, but what are we doing first thing up after lunch? And he goes, I don't want to bother you. And I goes, no, it's great for you to ask me those questions because I'm thinking about what we're doing after lunch, and I want to make sure you know what we're doing after lunch. And but you always kind of have to know what the different options are. When I was a second AD, I used to say, one of the big responsibilities you have is putting together the call sheet so everybody knows what's going on the next day and what time they're supposed to arrive. And I used to say, a lot of times at the end of the day, all of a sudden you push your call time an hour or this or something completely changes. And a lot of times you don't have the call sheet ready for people to hand out at the end of the day. And or because you got to completely start from scratch on what it is. But I used to say, we don't need a call sheet. I've talked to everybody on the crew. I've talked to every department head. They all know what's going on. They all know what plan B is. They all know what plan C is. So all we have to do is verbal. It's a 7 o'clock call and we're starting in the living room. And boom, we're off and running. 95% of the crew knows what's going on, and they don't have a call sheet. So you just have to make sure you have those contingency plans and you've communicated them with everybody you need to. And then I had the other thing, the third thing, but I learned this from a great old AD too. Never put your director in a situation where they have to say, I don't know. Everybody looks up to the director as this person on a pedestal who has every answer. But sometimes you just kind of have to pull them aside and say, do you need Dustin in that second scene tomorrow? And you don't want to be in front of the whole crew and he says, I don't know. I haven't really thought about it. You want to let them know, here's something we got to solve. And I don't need the answer right this second, but we'll need to figure this out at some point. But you don't want to announce that in front of everybody. You don't want to embarrass your director, put them in a situation where the crew thinks they don't know what's going on, or they don't have all the answers. So you kind of have to protect your director from that standpoint. I don't know if I communicated that right, but I remember being an impatient second AD and going up to the first AD, and I'm trying to do the call sheet and say, what about scene 7 tomorrow? We never figured out who's in that scene. And the first AD would say, okay, I'll ask the director. And so I'm standing there like, all right, well, ask the director. And he was the one who told me, I'll ask the director when it's the right time to ask the director, but I can't ask the director now in front of everybody because I know he doesn't know. So I'll get you the answer, but you know, we may have to wrap, and I'll get you the answer after we've wrapped. But you just have to protect the director in that regard.
Okay, awesome. And another question is your personal everyday motivator.
Well, again, it comes down to we're trying to make something good, and we're trying to do something special. We're trying to do something that a lot of people want to do that they can't do. So I'm kind of a perfectionist. So I got to make sure I'm doing everything I'm doing to the best of my ability. So my personal motivator is how can I do my job at peak efficiency, at peak ability all the time. I know I'm going to screw up here and there. I know I'm going to get something wrong, but you know, I'm putting 150% into it every day, and you know, I just kind of want to quietly do my job and do it well. And you know, I don't need the crew to applaud at the end of the day when we've wrapped in 10 hours and we've gotten everything we want. And it's because I engineered the day and did it that way. I don't need those accolades. I just need it for me. Like, I remember one time as a second AD, we were doing this scene. It took place in Vietnam, and we had hundreds of soldiers all looked like supposed to be in a sweaty fire base for weeks. And there's helicopters, and there's explosions going off, and there's these half tracks going through, and there's mud, and it's just all this stuff. And I was like, you know, none of this would have been here unless I did the call sheet. And it's like, I'm not expecting anybody to pat me on the back, but it's kind of like a very satisfying feeling to know that none of this would have been here unless I figured it out yesterday. And now I got to go figure out tomorrow. So I can't sit here and applaud myself. But you know, sometimes it's just kind of amazing. There's so many things going on the set, and you know, I'm kind of quietly the puppeteer who's pulling a lot of strings to get the stuff to work, and it's just it's very satisfying for all those pieces to put together.
It is,
and so it's not my personal motivator. It's just I'm always pushing myself a little bit farther, and you know, trying to make whoever I'm working with better.
I would like to end our webinar with the question about it. Not a question, an advice. So, what would be the one piece of advice that you would give to all those filmmakers who are now in Pennsylvania trying to make it through and trying to really accomplish something big and reach their American dream? So what would be that one piece of advice that you would give them to end this webinar with?
Well, again, it's just follow your passion. And, you know, whether or not you want to be a costume designer or a set costumer or a camera assistant or the prop master, you know, just, you know, have that passion that motivates you to be part of the team that puts together the stuff that's going to last longer than we are. I remember hearing somebody describe, it wasn't a set I was on, but a set was at the end of the day and everybody's rushing around trying to get stuff, and the producer, no, it was actually the director, said, who's actually also the actor who was the star in it. He goes, "Why are we rushing? Why are we putting this shot at jeopardy? Because everybody's rushing around because it's the end of the day." He goes, what we're doing here is forever." And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's right. This scene's going to outlive me, and it's going to outlive everybody who's here on the set. We're making, I hate saying we're making art, because we're making art, but it's also commerce, and it's a lot of times it's also schlock, but we're making it. But it's going to be around way after I'm gone, and way after most of the people on the set have passed away. This production is going to endure, so we better do a pretty good job of it. So it all comes down to you got to be driven by your passion, and you got to love what you're doing, and you got to love the medium. And if you're not working on a set, watch movies, watch TV shows, watch good ones and watch bad ones. I learned so much in the 80s from watching bad movies on HBO, like over and over again. I learned more from watching bad movies than I did from watching good movies, because you see what works and what doesn't work. And it's all part of the learning the vocabulary of the craft. So, but if you don't have that passion, go sell insurance.
And
not that there's anything wrong with insurance.
Nothing wrong with insurance. But this is definitely the business of passion. You have to love it to be in it.
Yeah. Because it's really hard, and so you better love it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. With all the time that it takes of the day, and the work days of 16 to 21 hours and often more. So yes, absolutely.
In rain and snow and sleet, and hot and cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, who would you like to nominate to join our mission of helping aspiring actors and filmmakers reach their American dream?
You throw me for a loop on this one. I'd have to say Diane Heary.
All right, Diane Heary. Reach out to Diane Heary.
Because I've known Diane for a couple 100 years, and she's seen a lot, and she has passion, and I think she's got a really good perspective on this business. And
Diane herself has helped a lot of people move up the ladder. So I definitely think it's a wonderful nomination. We'll reach out to Diane. Meanwhile, thank you so much.
She's probably gonna kill me for having said that, but
I doubt it. But honestly, we're very appreciative of your time, and to everybody who was listening, thank you very much for your time with us. And John is actually one of our board members on Pennsylvania Film Industry Association, and he's committing a lot of time to helping us bring more film work to Pennsylvania. And now he's also committing time to help prepare our actors and filmmakers for when we bring a lot of work here. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, John. And have a wonderful evening, and we will see you at the next webinar.
All right. Thank you. I enjoyed it.